Morning at the Montiel estate always arrived draped in a kind of elegant silence. The long marble hallways glowed faintly, touched by pale light spilling through towering windows. The scent of roses from the garden drifted in with the early breeze, beautiful yet distant. Tucked away in the farthest corner of the mansion, Alina Vargas, 18 years old, awoke in a room barely 8 square meters wide. Peeling paint, dim yellow light from a single bulb, she lived here like a forgotten cog in the quiet machinery of a wealthy household. No one knew her name. No one cared why a young girl from a faraway village had chosen to vanish into this place. Only she remembered, her mother, bedridden and battling a ruthless illness, waiting for the money Elena had promised to send. The rag had grown thin at the edges, soaked with bleach and fatigue, moving in tired circles under Elena's aching hands. She was scrubbing the last corner of the grand marble hallway when a familiar cold voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Well, well, what do we have here, Claudia?" The longtime housekeeper tilted her head, her eyes sharp with mockery. "The little peasant princess still hasn't finished?" Elena didn't reply. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor, as if searching for an escape. Claudia stepped closer, each heel click on the freshly polished floor echoing like pressure on Elena's chest. "Cat got your tongue? Or did they never teach you manners in your village?" Then came the sharpest jab. "A girl who sleeps in the service quarters should be used to living like livestock. I bet your barn back home was more comfortable than this place." Elena gripped the mop handle tighter, her entire body trembling. But she stayed silent, because if she opened her mouth, she knew the tears would follow. The door closed behind Claudia, leaving Elena hollow in the silence of the grand hall. She gathered the cleaning supplies, her hands still trembling from the anger she had swallowed whole. Night had fallen by the time Elena quietly returned to the tiny room at the end of the corridor. So far out of sight, it was as if it didn't exist. The space was no bigger than a closet, and the dull yellow ceiling bulb did little to chase away the cold. She sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady her breath, but then nothing held her back. The sobs tore from her throat, raw as gravel. She buried her face in the pillow, trying to muffle the sound, but the tears soaked through the fabric regardless. Elena didn't even know why she was crying. Was it exhaustion, humiliation, or a sorrow too vast to name? All she knew was that her chest hurt as if a stone sat upon it, heavy and immovable. The sudden sound of the door opening made Elena stop crying. She turned quickly, cheeks flushed, eyes still wet with fear. Standing in the doorway was Gabriel Montiel, the owner of the estate. He wore a white shirt, his tie loosened, hair slightly tousled, as if he had just come from a long meeting. Elena jumped up, hastily wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb." But Gabriel didn't speak. He looked at her, not like a master surveying a servant, but like a man seeing something real for the first time. Then the unimaginable happened. He knelt down, right there in the tiny room on the tear-stained floor. "Forgive me," he said, his voice low and hoarse, "for not seeing you sooner, for letting you suffer in silence with no one to speak for you." The room held its breath. Elena stared at the powerful man now kneeling before her, and something inside her began to shift. The next morning, something felt off-kilter in the rhythm of the estate. Claudia, pristine in her black uniform, entered the library as she always did. But this time, Gabriel was already waiting. "You won't need to come back," he said, his voice final, like the closing of a door. Claudia froze, lips pressed into a tight line, but Gabriel's gaze was ice-level, leaving no room for argument. Within the hour, she was gone. No one mourned her absence. Elena, meanwhile, stood by the window of her new room on the second floor, facing the rose garden she once only dared to admire from afar. The sheer white curtains fluttered in the breeze, as if inviting her toward something different. Teresa, Gabriel's personal assistant, arrived with a stack of books. "Mr. Montiel says you're free to study anything you wish." Elena brushed her fingers across the cover of the first book, still in disbelief. Things were changing. not by magic, but because someone had truly seen her. That afternoon, Elena was invited to tea on the veranda for the first time. She wore a pale blue dress Teresa had chosen, her hair falling softly to her shoulders. Everything in her still hesitated, as if one wrong step would make the kindness vanish. Gabriel was already waiting, rising as she approached. He pulled out her chair, a gesture so courteous it made her momentarily forget how to respond. "Do you take your tea with sugar or honey?" he asked. "Sugar, 2 spoons," she said quietly. They sat across from each other, a simple yet elegant tea table between them, fresh flowers and crystal, the warm scent of pastries filling the air. Gabriel spoke first. "Teresa tells me you enjoy reading." "I do. I once wanted to study literature, but—" The sentence trailed off into silence. Gabriel paused. "Your mother is still in your village?" Elena nodded. "She has severe arthritis. I send money every month for her medicine." His gaze grew somber. "I understand." She looked up, meeting his eyes fully for the first time. "You've lost someone too?" Gabriel nodded. "My wife. Car accident. 3 years ago." The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt like recognition, needing no explanation, no pity. After that afternoon tea, Elena began spending her days in the library. It was the only place in the estate where she felt at peace, a space free of orders or expectations, filled only with old books breathing of distant worlds. She studied each word, every concept, jotting notes carefully as if every sentence were a brick in rebuilding who she was. One evening, after the sun had slipped away and the warm glow of lamps bathed the dark wooden shelves, Gabriel entered. He carried a bottle of red wine and 2 crystal glasses. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, his eyes softening at the sight of her reading. "No," Elena whispered, gently closing the book in her hands. He sat beside her. In her lap lay a collection of Pablo Neruda's poems, open to sonnet fixate. Gabriel leaned in, reading aloud. "I like for you to be still. It is as though you were absent." "My favorite," Elena murmured. Gabriel poured the wine, offering her a glass. When their fingers brushed, something in her chest tightened. "You're learning fast," he said. "Teresa says you read more than our legal staff." Elena smiled faintly. "I just want to be worthy of all this." Gabriel looked at her for a long moment. "Or of me?" She didn't reply, but her eyes, lit by wine and lamplight, spoke volumes. The room was wrapped in silence, broken only by the whisper of night air through the window and the faint scent of old wood lingering in the air. Elena took a sip of wine, the warmth of it unfolding slowly across her tongue. Gabriel looked at her not as a master, but as a man slowly peeling away every layer of armor. "Elena," he said softly, "I've never met anyone like you." She looked up, her eyes melting into the glow of the lamp. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," he whispered. Gabriel leaned in. The first kiss touched her lips like a vow, trembling but true. Not hurried, not unsure, just 2 lost souls finding each other in a world too vast to face alone. Elena closed her eyes, letting feeling take the lead. When his hand found her cheek, she didn't pull away. When he whispered, "Let me be part of your world," she nodded, barely, like a breath. That night they didn't say much. There were only glances, silence, tender touches, and hearts beating in sync. Elena had never imagined love could begin in such stillness. Not flashy, not dramatic, but strong enough to shift everything she believed about who she was. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, falling softly across the pristine white bedsheets. Elena opened her eyes, the first sensation a sense of warmth, followed swiftly by confusion. This wasn't the familiar room downstairs. This was Gabrielle's room. She sat up, the smooth fabric of the sheets brushing her skin like a silent reminder of the night before. Her heart pounded. She looked around. A tailored suit hung neatly. A luxury watch gleamed on the nightstand, and a photo of a smiling woman rested beside it. His wife? The sense of not belonging surged like a crashing wave. She clutched the blanket to her chest, her breath catching. "How are you doing?" she whispered to herself. "A maid." One night. A mistake? Before she could second guess, Elena stepped out of bed, dressed quickly. She reached for her old suitcase and began packing. She sat still for a moment, heart racing. The memory of Gabriel's touch, Lucia's laughter, Teresa's kindness, they all tugged at her. But fear spoke louder. She had to leave before the dream turned into a cruel joke. Elena was hurriedly stuffing the last blouse into her suitcase when the door swung open. Teresa stood there, her gaze sharper than usual, not angry, but filled with a wordless understanding. "Elena," she said slowly, "where are you planning to go?" "I shouldn't be here," Elena replied, eyes rimmed with red. "I don't belong in this world." Teresa stepped inside, gently closing the door behind her. They call it Cinderella syndrome. When someone's lived with pain for too long, they run when happiness finally knocks. Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm not the girl in this dream." The door creaked again. Lucia, 10 years old, peeked in. "Miss Elena?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Dad said you're staying forever. Is that true?" Elena choked up. She couldn't answer. Lucia came closer and wrapped her arms tightly around her. "You make this house feel warm again. I miss the way he smiles when you're around." Teresa smiled gently, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. "You don't need to be perfect to be loved, Elena. You only need the courage to stay." The door swung open for the third time. Gabriel stepped inside, his eyes landing instantly on the open suitcase and Elena's tear-streaked face. "You were going to leave without a word?" he asked, voice hoarse, as if trying to contain something breaking inside. Elena lowered her head. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That last night was a mistake. That I'm not enough. That I'll ruin your life." Gabriel moved closer, taking her hand. "My life was already a desert, Elena. A schedule on repeat, hollow meetings, loneliness disguised as power." He sat beside her, not kneeling like before, but his gaze carried more depth than any posture could. "Tonight I knelt out of guilt," he said. "Today I stand before you because I love you." Gabriel reached into his pocket, not for a ring, but a folded piece of paper. On it in his handwriting were the words, "Give me the chance to love you every day, not through titles, but through truth." She read the words again, her fingers trembling. No ring, no diamonds, just a promise. And it was worth more than anything else. Elena looked at the note, her hands trembling. She didn't say yes. She simply nodded. And in that silence, a promise, louder than any vow, was made. After that silent nod, Elena said nothing more. But something in her gaze had softened, not because of Gabriel's promise, but because of the honesty that required no embellishment. A few days later, he said, "I want to meet your mother." Elena froze. No one had ever said that to her, as if that part of her life was too small to be acknowledged. But Gabriel didn't see her past as something to be hidden. He wanted to understand everything that had made her. The car rolled out of the city, down red dirt roads lined with endless rice fields that stretched like a green quilt of home. Elena sat by the window, her heart racing as her old house came into view. Gabriel was at the wheel. Lucia had fallen asleep in the back seat, still clutching her rag doll. The modest house appeared behind a grove of trees, its tin roof faded, but the vegetable garden still thriving. On the wooden porch, Rosa Vargas, Elena's mother, waited, frail but bright-eyed. "Elena," she smiled, voice trembling. "Mama." Elena ran to embrace her. Gabriel stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. "I'm Gabriel Montiel." Rosa looked at the tall man beside her daughter, then nodded gently. "Thank you for putting the light back in her eyes." Gabriel handed her an envelope. "These are the property transfer documents. This house now belongs to you, not out of charity, but because this place is Alina's root. And now, part of ours too. A week later, Alina was led to the East Wing room, once a guest suite for dignitaries, now sealed off for days. Gabriel stood by the door, eyes glowing with the nervous energy of a boy preparing his first gift for someone he loves. "Close your eyes," he whispered. Alina obeyed, feeling his gentle hands guide her forward. "When you open them, I hope you see yourself here." The door opened, and before her was a whole new world. Walls painted soft peach, white silk curtains swaying gently with the breeze. A canopy bed sat in the center, with cream linens and dried flowers pressed in glass frames on the walls. In the corner, a reading nook recreated the porch from her mother's home, an old wooden chair, embroidered pillows, and the faint scent of jasmine. But what took her breath away was a frame on the wall, her old maid uniform, carefully preserved under glass. "To remind you how far you've come," Gabriel said, "and that you don't have to forget your past to begin a new chapter." That afternoon, Teresa led Elena to the rose garden, the same one she had once only dared to admire from her second-floor window. But this time, something was different. The rose beds were trimmed into the shape of a perfect heart, leading to a small table draped in white linen, topped with 2 bouquets of baby's breath and a blue velvet box. Gabriel stepped out from behind the floral arch, not in a suit, but in a simple white shirt, sleeves casually rolled. "Elena Vargas," he began, not loud, but steady. "I don't need a chapel. I don't need a string quartet. I just need a place with you and your heart." He knelt down. Lucia ran up, placing a handmade doll in Elena's hands. "I want you to be my mom, not just on paper, but in my heart." Elena wept. She didn't look at the ring box or the flowers. She looked at Gabriel, the one who saw her when the world didn't. "I do," she whispered, "not just to marry you, but to stand beside you every single day." That evening, Elena sat by the window of her new room, the sunset casting everything in soft amber. In her hands was the doll Lucia had given her, a sapphire ring sparkling on her finger. She was no longer the girl hiding at the end of the corridor, clutching a mop, avoiding every gaze. She was someone who had been seen, not for her looks, but for her heart. Gabriel entered, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Ready?" Elena smiled. "I've been ready since the moment you saw me." Love is not about being rescued. Love is when someone sees you clearly among a crowd of blur. When someone chooses you, not because you're perfect, but because your heart is honest. Elena had found something greater than love. She had been seen, she had been chosen, and that made all the difference.